The Aegis drifted silently in the void, a speck of human ambition against the endless darkness of the cosmos. Ethan Hayes sat at his workstation, the dim glow of the monitors casting shadows across his sharp features. Charts and data streamed across the screen, gravitational anomalies, faint electromagnetic pulses, and a series of inexplicable distortions picked up on their long-range scanners. The signal they'd come to investigate was maddeningly vague, as though the universe itself was mocking their curiosity. Ethan ran a hand through his unruly brown hair, frustration etched on his face. "We've been chasing static for weeks," he muttered to himself, his voice low enough not to disturb the crew scattered across the dimly lit command deck. "Static?" a voice called from behind. Ethan turned to see Lieutenant Vargas, the ship's tactical officer, leaning against the bulkhead with a smirk. "You call it static. Command calls it the discovery of a lifetime." "Command hasn't spent 2 months cooped up in this tin can," Ethan shot back, though there was a flicker of amusement in his tone. Vargas shrugged, his smirk widening. "You're the genius exobiologist. Maybe it's just aliens calling collect." Before Ethan could respond, the ship shuddered violently, throwing them both off balance. Alarms blared, and red lights flooded the deck. "Report!" Captain Mahira Singh's commanding voice cut through the chaos. She stood at the helm, her eyes sharp as she scanned the monitors. "Unidentified spatial distortion, Captain," called Ensign Lee from the navigation console. "It's massive. Dead ahead." Ethan scrambled to his station, his pulse quickening. On his screen, the distortion resolved into a swirling vortex of light and shadow, a wormhole, impossibly vast and unnervingly stable. "Evasive maneuvers," Singh barked, but it was too late. The Aegis lurched as an unseen force dragged it toward the vortex. The crew's shouts mixed with the groaning of the ship's hull as they were pulled inexorably into the swirling maw. Ethan awoke to silence. His body ached, and his head throbbed as he unbuckled his harness and looked around. The command deck was in shambles, consoles flickering weakly amid the wreckage. "Captain? Vargas? Anyone?" His voice echoed in the stillness. A faint groan answered from the corner. Ethan stumbled toward it, finding Vargas pinned under a collapsed console. With effort, he freed him, and the two men surveyed the damage. "We're not in Kansas anymore," Vargas said weakly, gesturing toward the viewport. Ethan followed his gaze, and his breath caught. The planet outside was a riot of colors, with skies painted in hues of teal and gold, and a surface teeming with lush, alien vegetation. Massive spires of crystalline structures pierced the horizon, glowing faintly in the twilight. Before they could fully process the sight, a warning beep drew Ethan's attention to the comms panel. The ship's automated systems reported that most of the crew had ejected in emergency pods scattered across the planet's surface. "They're alive," Ethan said, relief flooding his voice. "Then we need to get moving," Vargas replied. The ship shuddered again, this time from an external force. A sharp, rhythmic pounding echoed through the hull, growing louder. "Something's out there," Ethan said, his throat tightening. The pounding stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Then, with a screech of tearing metal, a section of the hull was ripped away. Standing in the breach was a figure unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined. She was tall, her form humanoid, but unmistakably alien. Her skin shimmered with a pearlescent glow, and her hair, a cascade of dark vine-like tendrils, framed sharp, angular features. Her eyes, luminescent and unblinking, seemed to pierce through Ethan. She wore a suit of intricate, organic armor that pulsed faintly with light, as though alive. Ethan and Vargas froze as the alien woman stepped inside, her movements fluid and deliberate. She stopped a few paces away, tilting her head as she studied them. "You are mine," she said, her voice resonating like a melody within their minds. Ethan blinked, his confusion mingling with indignation. "I beg your pardon?" She stepped closer, her gaze locking onto Ethan. "You are the one. The threads have brought you here. You belong to me now." Vargas made a move for his sidearm, but the alien woman raised a hand, and an unseen force pinned him to the wall. "Enough!" she said, her voice carrying a tone of finality. "You are in my domain. Resistance is futile." Ethan took a cautious step forward, his heart pounding. "Listen, I don't know who or what you think I am, but I'm not yours. I don't belong to anyone." The alien woman's expression shifted, a flicker of something unreadable crossing her face. "You do not understand, human, but you will." Before Ethan could respond, the floor beneath them trembled, and a low, resonant hum filled the air. The alien woman turned sharply, her gaze snapping to the horizon. "They come," she said, her tone suddenly grim. "If you value your life, follow me." Ethan hesitated, glancing at Vargas, who was still pinned to the wall, then back at the alien woman. The hum grew louder, accompanied by flashes of light in the distance. "Ethan," Vargas called, his voice strained. "We don't have a choice." Ethan swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Taking a deep breath, he nodded. "All right, lead the way." The alien woman gave a satisfied nod and released Vargas from the wall. Without another word, she turned and leapt through the breach, her movements as graceful as they were alien. Ethan helped Vargas to his feet, and together they followed her into the unknown, the vibrant and perilous world unfolding before them like a dream and a nightmare. Ethan staggered over the uneven terrain, his boots sinking into the alien soil. It had an odd, sponge-like texture, giving slightly with each step before springing back. The air was thick and humid, carrying a strange sweet scent that was both alluring and unsettling. The alien vegetation loomed around them, towering, bioluminescent trees with vines that pulsed faintly, like veins carrying some mysterious life force. Ahead, Carathel moved with an effortless grace. Every movement of her lithe frame seemed calculated, deliberate, as though she was one with her surroundings. Ethan struggled to keep pace, stealing glances at her now and then, unsure whether to feel gratitude, fear, or resentment toward his enigmatic guide. Behind him, Vargas groaned, clutching his side where a bruise was already forming from his earlier collision with the wall. "This is insane," Vargas muttered. "First she claims you're hers, now we're just supposed to follow her through this alien jungle? Do you trust her?" "No," Ethan replied, his voice low. "But I trust whatever was making that hum back there even less." Carathel stopped abruptly, her sharp, glowing eyes fixing on them. "Your distrust is loud, human. Do you not realize that your survival hinges on my guidance?" Ethan bristled at her tone, but before he could respond, Vargas snorted. "Loud? We're just trying not to get killed, lady." Carathel tilted her head, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "Your companion's defiance is amusing, but his noise could draw predators." "Predators?" Ethan asked, a knot forming in his stomach. Carathel turned away, her voice calm but firm. "Stay close. The wilds of Sathara do not forgive carelessness." They continued in tense silence, the alien wilderness around them growing denser. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle in the underbrush, every faint chirp or hum from unseen creatures sent a shiver down his spine. "So," Ethan finally said, breaking the silence, "you said something back there about threads and me being the one. Care to explain?" Carathel glanced over her shoulder, her expression inscrutable. "You are an anomaly, Ethan Hayes. Your presence resonates with the life threads of this world, a phenomenon rare and powerful. It is why you survived the storm and why you were drawn to me." "Life threads?" Ethan echoed, skepticism lacing his tone. "Yes, all things here, plants, animals, even the air, are bound by the threads. They connect us, sustain us, guide us." Her voice softened, almost reverent. "And you are intertwined with them now, whether you accept it or not." Ethan frowned. "That sounds spiritual, mystical. I'm a scientist. I deal in facts, not destiny." Carathel stopped again, turning fully to face him. Her glowing eyes locked onto his, and for the first time, Ethan saw something behind her confident exterior, an intensity, an urgency that made his breath catch. "Your science is blind here," she said quietly. "You may not believe, but the threads do not care for your belief. They are what they are, and they have claimed you." Ethan wanted to argue, to push back against her cryptic pronouncements, but something in her gaze stilled him. It wasn't arrogance he saw, it was conviction, born of something deeper than he could yet understand. "Fine," he said, exhaling. "Let's say you're right. What do these threads want with me?" Carathel's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. To save what is left, or to destroy it. Hours later, they reached a clearing. The ground sloped upward to a cliff edge overlooking a vast expanse of crystalline plains. The spires Ethan had seen from the ship rose in the distance, their surfaces shimmering with cascading hues of light. Carathel gestured for them to stop. "We rest here. The outpost is beyond the spires, but the journey will be perilous. You will need your strength." Ethan and Vargas sank to the ground gratefully. Vargas leaned against a smooth, warm rock and closed his eyes, while Ethan stared out at the alien horizon. The beauty of it was staggering, and yet it was laced with an unshakable sense of danger. Carathel sat a few paces away, her posture relaxed yet alert, as though she were always poised to react. Ethan hesitated, then spoke. "You seem so sure of everything. About this place, about me. Don't you ever doubt?" Carathel's gaze shifted to him, and for a moment she seemed to consider her answer carefully. "Doubt is a luxury I cannot afford. My people depend on me. This world depends on me. And now, so do you." The weight of her words hung in the air. Ethan searched her expression, looking for cracks in her facade, but found only a quiet strength. "I didn't ask to depend on you," he said finally, his voice softer than he intended. "No," she replied, her tone almost gentle. "But you do." They sat in silence for a while after that, the alien world stretching endlessly before them. Night fell swiftly, the sky shifting to a deep indigo scattered with unfamiliar constellations. The bioluminescent flora glowed brighter, casting an otherworldly light across the clearing. Ethan stood at the cliff's edge, his thoughts racing. Vargas snored softly behind him, but Carathel remained awake, her gaze scanning the horizon. "You should rest," she said without looking at him. Ethan shook his head. "I can't. Not yet." Carathel rose gracefully and joined him. For a while they stood in silence, the alien night wrapping around them like a shroud. "You are restless," she observed. "No kidding," Ethan said. "In the span of a day, I've been pulled through a wormhole, marooned on an alien planet, and told I'm part of some cosmic life web I don't understand. Rest doesn't come easy after that." To his surprise, Carathel smiled faintly. "Humans are peculiar. You cling so tightly to logic, yet your emotions rule you more than you admit." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And you're not ruled by emotions?" Her smile faded, and for the first time Ethan saw a flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "I am Satharin. Emotions are part of the threads, but they do not govern us. Yet—" She hesitated, as if deciding whether to continue. "The connection I feel with you is unusual. It unsettles me." Ethan blinked, caught off guard by her admission. "Unsettles you how?" She looked at him, her glowing eyes softer now. "You are different. I cannot explain it, but the threads do not lie. There is a bond between us whether we want it or not." The weight of her words settled over him, both unsettling and strangely comforting. For the first time, he wondered if there was more to her claim than arrogance or mysticism. "Then I guess we'll figure it out," Ethan said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Carathel nodded, her expression unreadable. "Yes, we will." The two of them stood in silence once more, the alien night stretching infinitely around them, their fates tethered by threads neither fully understood. Morning on Sathera came with breathtaking suddenness, the sky ablaze in hues of rose and gold. Ethan blinked against the light as the first rays pierced the canopy of bioluminescent foliage. The vibrant colors seemed to hum with life, each beam igniting the alien landscape in ways that no Earth dawn ever could. He glanced around the camp. Vargas was still groggy, rubbing his eyes and muttering complaints about the lack of coffee, while Carathel stood at the edge of the clearing, scanning the horizon with an expression of focused intensity. "What's the plan?" Ethan asked, rising and brushing dirt from his jacket. Carathel turned, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. "The outpost lies past the crystalline spires. We must move swiftly. The threads warn of approaching danger." Ethan frowned, skeptical. "The threads again. You keep talking about them like they're alive." "They are," Carathel replied, her tone patient but firm. "And if you listened, you might feel them too." Vargas snorted. "Yeah, I'll start listening to invisible threads right after I sprout wings." A faint smile tugged at Carathel's lips, but it vanished as she turned toward the path ahead. "Mockery will not protect you. Stay close, and perhaps you will survive." Ethan sighed, falling in step behind her. Vargas followed, grumbling under his breath, but Ethan couldn't deny the unease creeping into his chest. Carathel's warnings might be cryptic, but they weren't unfounded. Something about this world felt alive, in ways he couldn't yet explain. As they approached the crystalline spires, the terrain shifted dramatically. The lush vegetation gave way to a barren plain, dotted with jagged outcroppings of obsidian-like rock. The air grew cooler, and an unnatural silence settled over the group. "Why is it so quiet?" Ethan asked, his voice hushed. "This region is sacred," Carathel said without turning. "The threads are strong here, and the land holds its breath in reverence." Vargas scoffed. "Or maybe all the local wildlife knows better than to hang around." Before Carathel could respond, a low, guttural growl echoed across the plain. The sound was deep and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder, but with a predatory edge that made Ethan's blood run cold. "What was that?" he asked, instinctively gripping the makeshift staff he'd fashioned from a sturdy branch. Carathel's hand shot out, motioning for silence. Her eyes scanned the horizon, and her posture tensed like a coiled spring. "A shadran, a predator. It hunts in packs." As if on cue, a second growl answered the first, closer this time. Then another and another, until the air was filled with the haunting symphony of unseen hunters. "We need to move," Carathel said, her voice low and urgent. "Now." The three broke into a run, their footsteps crunching against the crystalline fragments scattered across the ground. The spires loomed larger with each step, their surfaces shimmering as if reflecting not light, but some inner energy. The first shadran appeared out of nowhere, a blur of sleek, sinewy muscle and glistening black scales. Its 4 legs moved with a terrifying grace, and its glowing, multifaceted eyes locked onto the group with predatory precision. "Down!" Carathel shouted, shoving Ethan aside as the creature leapt. It sailed over them, landing with a guttural snarl and spinning to attack again. Vargas scrambled to his feet, fumbling for his sidearm. "Cover me!" Carathel didn't hesitate. She raised her hand, and the air around her seemed to ripple. A pulse of energy shot outward, striking the shadran and sending it skidding across the ground. "What the hell was that?" Ethan yelled, his heart pounding. "The threads," Carathel replied, her voice tight with focus. "They bend to my will." Another shadran appeared, followed by 2 more. Carathel moved like a dancer, her movements fluid and precise as she wielded the energy around her like a weapon. Ethan and Vargas fought to stay out of her way, dodging and weaving as the creatures lunged and snapped. One of the beasts broke through, its razor-sharp claws swiping dangerously close to Vargas. Ethan reacted instinctively, swinging his makeshift staff with all his strength. The impact sent the creature staggering, and Vargas took the opportunity to fire a shot into its flank. "Nice shot," Ethan called, adrenaline surging through him. "Don't celebrate yet," Vargas shouted, pointing at another Shadran charging toward them. Carathil intercepted it, her hand glowing with a bright, searing light. The creature froze mid-lunge, its body writhing as though caught in an invisible net. With a flick of her wrist, Carathil sent it hurtling into a nearby spire where it lay still. The remaining Shadran hesitated, their guttural growls fading as they retreated into the shadows. "Are they gone?" Ethan asked, his chest heaving. "For now," Carathil replied, lowering her hand. She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You fought well, human. Perhaps there is hope for you yet." Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow, offering a weak smile. "High praise coming from you." Carathil's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly. "Do not let it go to your head." They reached the base of the spires by nightfall. Up close, the structures were even more imposing, their surfaces smooth and cool to the touch. Carathil led them to a narrow opening at the base of the largest spire, where faint, flickering lights hinted at some form of technology within. "This is it," she said, gesturing for them to enter. Inside, the air was warmer, filled with a faint hum that resonated in Ethan's bones. The walls glowed faintly, etched with intricate patterns that pulsed in time with the hum. "What is this place?" Vargas asked, his voice awestruck. "A nexus," Carathil replied. "A conduit for the threads. It will protect us while we rest." Ethan studied the walls, running his fingers over the glowing patterns. The hum seemed to grow stronger at his touch, sending a strange warmth through his body. "You feel it," Carathil said, watching him closely. "The threads recognize you." Ethan turned to her, his brow furrowed. "What does that mean? Why me?" "I do not yet know," Carathil admitted, her tone unusually soft. "But the answers will come. For now, we must prepare. The journey ahead will test us all." As they settled into the nexus, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that the threads were indeed watching him, binding him to this alien world in ways he couldn't yet comprehend. And for the first time, he began to wonder if Carathil was right, if his presence here was no accident, but a call he was destined to answer. Ethan woke to the faint hum of the nexus reverberating through his body. The walls of the chamber glowed softly, their intricate patterns shifting as though alive, responding to an unseen rhythm. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a symphony of light and sound that was both alien and strangely soothing. Vargas was still asleep, sprawled on a flat outcropping of rock that Carathil had referred to as a resting slab. His snores competed with the nexus's hum, creating an oddly harmonious dissonance. Carathil, of course, was already awake. She stood near the chamber's central column, her hands resting lightly on its surface. Her eyes were closed, and she seemed to be in a trance, the patterns on the column pulsing in time with her breathing. Ethan approached cautiously, not wanting to startle her. "Morning," he said softly. Her eyes opened, glowing faintly in the dim light. "It is not morning," she replied. "Time flows differently here." Ethan glanced around the chamber. "That doesn't make it less unsettling." Carathil tilted her head, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You are adapting faster than I anticipated." "Not sure if that's a compliment or a warning," Ethan muttered. "It is both," she said, stepping away from the column. "The threads respond to you more strongly with each passing moment. It is unusual." Ethan crossed his arms, trying to mask his unease. "You keep saying that, but you still haven't explained what it means." "I cannot explain what I do not yet fully understand," Carathil admitted, her tone uncharacteristically candid. "But I can show you." Before Ethan could protest, she reached out and placed her hand on his chest. The contact sent a jolt of warmth through him, and the hum of the nexus grew louder, vibrating in his bones. "Close your eyes," she instructed. Ethan hesitated but complied. The moment his eyes closed, the world around him shifted. He felt as though he were floating, weightless, surrounded by an endless web of light and energy. The threads Carathil spoke of were everywhere, weaving through the air, the ground, even his own body. He opened his eyes with a gasp, stumbling back. What the hell was that? The threads, Carathil said simply. You are beginning to see them. Ethan shook his head, his heart racing. That's impossible. This is all impossible. And yet it is real, she said, her voice calm. The nexus amplifies the connection. Here the threads are strongest. Before Ethan could respond, Vargas groaned and sat up, rubbing his eyes. What's with all the glowing and whispering? Some of us are trying to sleep off near-death experiences. Get up, Carathil said curtly. We are leaving soon. Vargas blinked at her, then at Ethan. Did I miss something? Ethan sighed. Just more cryptic alien stuff. You know, the usual. They left the nexus as the spires cast long, eerie shadows across the plain. Carathil led them toward a narrow ravine, her movements confident and purposeful. This path will take us beneath the spires, she explained. There is a network of tunnels that connects to the outpost. Tunnels? Vargas asked, his skepticism clear. And what's waiting for us down there? More Shadran? Carathil glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. The Shadran do not venture below. Other dangers await. Great, Vargas muttered. Just what I wanted to hear. The entrance to the ravine was marked by a jagged arch of crystalline rock. As they descended, the air grew cooler, and the light from the spires dimmed, replaced by the faint glow of bioluminescent moss clinging to the walls. The tunnels were narrow and winding, their walls etched with the same shifting patterns Ethan had seen in the Nexus. The hum was fainter here, more like a distant pulse that seemed to echo in his mind. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Does anyone else feel like we're not alone down here? You are not imagining it, Carathil said. The tunnels are alive. Alive? Vargas said, his voice rising slightly. What does that mean? They are part of the threads, Carathil explained. They sense our presence. Fantastic, Vargas muttered. The walls have eyes. As they pressed deeper into the tunnels, the atmosphere grew heavier, as though the air itself resisted their intrusion. Ethan's chest tightened, and he struggled to catch his breath. We need to stop, he said, leaning against the wall. Carathil frowned, stepping closer. The threads are testing you. Testing me? Ethan said, his voice strained. What does that even mean? Before Carathil could answer, the tunnel walls shuddered, and a low, resonant sound filled the air. The glow from the moss intensified, casting flickering shadows that danced like specters. Move! Carathil shouted, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him forward. The ground beneath them trembled, and fissures opened in the floor, spewing plumes of glowing mist. Vargas stumbled, but managed to keep pace, his curses echoing through the tunnel. What's happening? Ethan yelled. The tunnels are rejecting us, Carathil said. We must reach the heart before they collapse. The heart? Vargas shouted. You've got to be kidding me. They sprinted through the twisting passages, the walls closing in around them. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, and the light from the moss pulsed in a frantic rhythm. Finally, they burst into a cavern unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. The walls were covered in crystalline formations that radiated a blinding light, and at the center of the chamber was a massive, pulsating orb of energy. This is the heart, Carathil said, her voice reverent. Ethan stared in awe, the threads of light and energy converging on the orb in a mesmerizing display. He felt drawn to it, the pull stronger than anything he had ever experienced. What now? Vargas asked, his voice barely audible over the hum. Carathil turned to Ethan, her glowing eyes filled with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. Now, we see if the threads truly accept him. Ethan took a hesitant step forward, the weight of her words sinking in. As he approached the orb, the threads around him began to vibrate, their glow intensifying. Ethan! Vargas called, but his voice was distant, drowned out by the hum. Ethan reached out, his hand trembling as it neared the orb. The moment his fingers brushed its surface, a surge of energy shot through him, and the world around him dissolved into light. Ethan floated in a sea of light, the threads of energy wrapping around him like tendrils, pulsating in perfect harmony with his heartbeat. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. A torrent of sensations, memories, and emotions flooding his mind all at once. He caught fleeting glimpses of alien landscapes, towering cities built into cliffsides, oceans teeming with bioluminescent creatures. Among the images were shadowy figures, their faces indistinct, but their voices clear, whispering in a language he didn't understand, yet felt he could almost grasp. "You are connected now." The voice was Carathel's, though it didn't come from any direction. It resonated within him, carried on the currents of the threads. "What's happening to me?" Ethan's voice sounded distant, even to his own ears. "The heart has accepted you," Carathel replied. "The threads are revealing their truths." Ethan wanted to argue, to demand answers, but the light pulled him deeper, unraveling layers of his mind he hadn't even known existed. Memories of Earth surfaced, his childhood, his failures, the gnawing sense of purposelessness that had led him to take a job on a dying mining colony. "Why me?" he whispered. The light didn't answer. Instead, it shifted, the threads coiling tighter around him before suddenly releasing him with a force that left him gasping. He opened his eyes to find himself back in the cavern. The heart still pulsed at the center, but its light had dimmed, as if it were resting. Vargas and Carathel stood a few feet away, their faces etched with a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Ethan," Vargas said, rushing over. "You were out for like 5 minutes. What the hell happened?" Ethan shook his head, struggling to find the words. I don't know. I saw things, felt things. It was like the threads were showing me—" "Showing you what?" Vargas pressed. "Everything," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. Carathel stepped closer, her expression unusually soft. "The threads have chosen you. You are now a part of them, and they a part of you. This is both a gift and a burden." "Gift?" Vargas snorted. "Sounds more like a brainwashing session to me." Ethan met Carathel's gaze. "What does this mean for me? For us?" "It means your path is no longer your own," Carathel said. "The threads will guide you, but they will also test you. You must be prepared." "Prepared for what?" Vargas asked. Carathel hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her features. "For what lies beyond the veil." The journey back through the tunnels was quieter, the atmosphere heavier than before. Ethan felt the threads everywhere now, their presence a constant hum in his mind. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was disorienting, like trying to tune into 1,000 radio frequencies at once. "You okay, man?" Vargas asked, as they climbed a steep incline. "Yeah," Ethan replied, though he wasn't sure if it was true. "Just adjusting." "To what?" Vargas asked. "Being a cosmic puppet?" Ethan shot him a look, but there was no malice in Vargas's tone, only concern. "I don't think it's like that," Ethan said. "It's more like I'm connected to something bigger. I just don't know what it wants from me." "Great," Vargas muttered. "Let's hope it's not something suicidal." Carathel, who had been walking ahead, stopped suddenly. She raised a hand, signaling them to be silent. "What is it?" Ethan asked, his voice low. "Something approaches," she said, her eyes narrowing. "The threads are restless." Before anyone could react, the tunnel ahead erupted in a cascade of rocks and glowing mist. From the debris emerged a figure, its silhouette tall and imposing. It was an alien, but unlike Carathel. Its body was covered in sleek, metallic armor that shimmered in the faint light, and its eyes glowed a deep crimson. In its hands was a staff that crackled with energy, the weapon humming in a way that resonated with the threads. "Carathel," the figure said, its voice deep and resonant. "You should not have come here." Ethan felt the air grow heavy, the threads vibrating with tension. Carathel stepped forward, her posture rigid but unyielding. "Relvax," she said, her voice steady. "I am not here to fight." "Then why have you brought them?" Relvax's gaze shifted to Ethan and Vargas, his eyes narrowing. "Outsiders have no place in the threads." "They are not outsiders," Carathel said. "The threads have accepted them." Relvax laughed, a cold, mirthless sound. "The threads are not infallible. They will see their mistake soon enough." Ethan felt a surge of anger, the threads around him flaring in response. "We're not a mistake," he said, stepping forward despite himself. "And we're not leaving." Relvax's eyes glowed brighter, and his staff crackled with energy. Bold words for a fragile being. Before Ethan could respond, Carathel raised a hand. "Enough. We have no time for this. Relvax, if you stand in our way, the threads themselves will judge you." The tension in the air was palpable, the hum of the threads building to a crescendo. For a moment, it seemed as though Relvax would attack, but then he lowered his staff, his expression unreadable. "Very well," he said. "But do not think this is over. The veil will test you all, and not all of you will survive." With that, he turned and vanished into the mist, leaving the group in uneasy silence. As they exited the tunnels, the light of Cythera's twin moons bathed the landscape in a silvery glow. Ethan took a deep breath, the fresh air a welcome relief after the oppressive atmosphere of the tunnels. "What was that about?" Vargas asked, breaking the silence. "Relvax is a guardian," Carathel said. "He believes his duty is to protect the threads from corruption." "And he thinks we're corrupting them?" Ethan asked. Carathel nodded. "He does not understand, but he will not be the last to challenge us." Ethan glanced back at the tunnels, his mind racing with questions. The threads had chosen him, but why? And what did it mean to go beyond the veil? For now, all he knew was that the journey ahead would test them all in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The terrain ahead was alien and foreboding, stretching into jagged peaks, shrouded in an iridescent mist that seemed to dance with a life of its own. Ethan could feel the threads humming in his mind, their resonance growing stronger with every step toward the veil. It was like a distant melody beckoning him forward, equal parts beautiful and unnerving. Carathel led the way, her movements precise and deliberate. Vargas followed close behind, grumbling under his breath but keeping pace. Ethan trailed at the rear, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The encounter with Relvax had left him on edge, and the landscape offered no reassurance. "What exactly are we walking into?" Vargas asked, breaking the tense silence. Carathel didn't look back. "The veil is a boundary, a threshold between realms. Beyond it lies the core of the threads, the source of their power." "And why do we need to go there?" Vargas pressed. "To understand," Carathel said simply. "Understand what?" Ethan interjected. "Everything," she replied, her tone distant. Ethan exchanged a glance with Vargas, who rolled his eyes. "Great. Love a mission with a clear goal." Despite the tension, Ethan couldn't help but chuckle. "At least we're not in the tunnels anymore." "Yeah," Vargas said, gesturing to the ominous mist ahead. "Now we just have to deal with whatever fresh nightmare is waiting in that." The mist thickened as they approached, its swirling patterns growing more erratic. Ethan felt a strange pull, as though the mist itself was aware of their presence. "Stay close," Carathel warned. As they stepped into the veil, the world around them shifted. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that prickled against their skin. The landscape blurred, colors bleeding together in surreal patterns. Shapes moved in the mist, indistinct and fleeting like shadows at the edge of perception. Ethan's pulse quickened. "What is this place?" "The veil is not just a boundary," Carathel said. "It is alive. It will test you." "Test us how?" Vargas asked, his voice tinged with panic. Before Carathel could answer, the ground beneath them trembled, and a low, resonant sound filled the air. The mist coalesced into a massive, amorphous form that loomed before them, its surface shifting and writhing like liquid. Ethan felt the threads vibrate violently, their hum rising to a deafening pitch. "What is that?" "A guardian of the veil," Carathel said, her voice steady. "It seeks to judge our worth." The creature surged forward, and Ethan barely had time to react. He dove to the side, narrowly avoiding a tendril of mist that lashed out like a whip. Vargas cursed and scrambled for cover, while Carathel stood her ground, her hands glowing with energy. "You can fight this thing?" Ethan shouted. "Not fight," Carathel said. "Resonate." She extended her arms, and the glow intensified, sending ripples through the mist. The creature hesitated, its form quivering as though in response to her energy. Ethan felt the threads pulling at him, urging him to act. He focused on the connection, letting the hum guide him. His hands began to glow faintly, mirroring Carathel's. "What the hell are you doing?" Vargas yelled. "I don't know," Ethan admitted, "but I think it's working." The creature turned its attention to him, its tendrils reaching out. Ethan braced himself, but instead of striking, the tendrils wrapped around him gently, probing, searching. Images flooded his mind, fragments of his past, his doubts, his fears. "You must show it your truth," Carathel said. "My truth?" Ethan asked, struggling to focus. "The threads respond to authenticity," she said. "If you resist, it will destroy you." Ethan closed his eyes, letting the memories surface. He thought of Earth, of the mistakes he had made, the people he had let down. He thought of the emptiness that had driven him to Sathara, and the strange, unexplainable connection he now felt to the threads. The creature quivered, its form softening. The tendrils withdrew, and the mist began to dissipate, revealing a narrow path leading deeper into the veil. "You did it," Carathel said, a note of admiration in her voice. "What just happened?" Vargas asked, still catching his breath. "The Guardian has deemed us worthy," Carathel said. "We may proceed." "Worthy of what?" Vargas demanded. "To face the core," Carathel said, her expression somber, "and to survive it." The path through the veil was treacherous, twisting and shifting with every step. The air grew colder, and the hum of the threads became almost unbearable, a constant pressure that weighed heavily on their minds. Ethan felt a growing sense of unease. The threads were stronger here, their presence almost overwhelming. He could feel them probing his thoughts, searching for something he couldn't quite grasp. Carathel seemed unaffected, her movements as precise as ever. Vargas, on the other hand, was visibly struggling, his steps faltering. "You okay?" Ethan asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Yeah," Vargas said, though his voice was strained. "Just feels like my head's about to explode." "The threads are testing you," Carathel said. "You must remain focused." "Easy for you to say," Vargas muttered. "You're used to this alien mumbo-jumbo." Despite the tension, Ethan felt a flicker of amusement. Vargas's sarcasm was a strange comfort in the midst of the chaos. As they neared the end of the path, the mist parted to reveal a massive structure, its surface covered in intricate patterns that pulsed with light. It was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen, a monument to a civilization far beyond his comprehension. "This is the core," Carathel said, her voice filled with awe. Ethan stared at the structure, a sense of both wonder and dread washing over him. He could feel the threads pulling at him, urging him forward. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," Carathel said, "we confront the truth of the threads, and ourselves." The core loomed before them, its light growing brighter. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped forward, the weight of the threads pressing down on him as he prepared to face whatever lay ahead. The core pulsed like a beating heart, each rhythmic thrum resonating through Ethan's body. It was both beautiful and terrifying, a construct of unimaginable power and purpose. The air was thick with the hum of the threads, their vibrations now a symphony of voices that spoke in a language beyond words. Carathel stepped forward first, her gaze steady, her expression one of reverence. Ethan followed, his heart pounding. Vargas hesitated at the threshold, muttering something under his breath before finally stepping into the light. As they approached, the core shifted, its intricate patterns rearranging themselves in a mesmerizing dance. Ethan felt a surge of energy, the threads tightening their hold on him. He staggered, clutching his head as visions flooded his mind. He saw Earth as it once was, teeming with life and potential, and then, as it had become, a world of decay, its people fractured and disillusioned. He saw Cythera, its ecosystems intertwined with the threads, its existence a delicate balance maintained by forces far older than humanity. And then he saw himself, not as he was, but as the threads perceived him, a man lost in his own failures, searching for meaning in a universe that seemed indifferent. "You are more than you believe," a voice whispered, soft yet resonant. Ethan opened his eyes to see Carathel standing beside him, her face illuminated by the core's light. "Do you see it now?" she asked. "I see something," Ethan said. "But I don't understand." "You are the bridge," Carathel said. "The threads chose you because you are unbound, neither fully of Cythera nor fully of Earth. You are both, and that makes you capable of shaping the connection between our worlds." Ethan stared at her, the weight of her words sinking in. "But I don't know how. I don't even know what they want from me." "The threads do not want," Carathel said. "They are. It is you who must decide what to make of them." Before Ethan could respond, a sharp crack echoed through the chamber. The core trembled, its light flickering. Vargas cursed, spinning around to face the source of the sound. Emerging from the mist was Relvax, his staff glowing with energy. Behind him were several other figures, their armor shimmering like liquid silver. "You were warned," Relvax said, his voice cold. "The veil is not meant for outsiders." Ethan felt a surge of anger, the threads around him flaring in response. "We're not here to destroy anything," he said. "We're trying to understand." "Understanding leads to exploitation," Relvax said. "Your kind cannot be trusted with the threads." Carathel stepped forward, her posture defiant. "Relvax, stand down. The core has allowed them to enter. That is proof enough of their worth." Relvax's eyes narrowed. "The core's judgment can be flawed. I will not risk Cythera's future on the whims of the threads." He raised his staff, its energy crackling ominously. Ethan felt the threads surge around him, a chaotic storm of emotions and power. He glanced at Carathel, who gave him a small nod, her expression one of quiet resolve. "We can't fight them, can we?" Ethan asked. "Not with weapons," Carathel said, "but the threads are yours now. Trust them." Ethan closed his eyes, focusing on the hum of the threads. He reached out with his mind, letting the energy flow through him. The threads responded, their resonance shifting to match his intent. When he opened his eyes, the chamber was filled with light. The threads had woven themselves into a barrier, their shimmering strands forming a protective dome around the core. Relvax and his followers hesitated, their weapons faltering against the thread's power. "You think this will save you?" Relvax demanded. "This isn't about saving us," Ethan said, his voice steady. "It's about saving all of us. Earth, Cythera, the threads. We're all connected. If we destroy one, we destroy everything." Relvax hesitated, his grip on his staff tightening. The threads around him vibrated, their hum discordant. Ethan could feel the conflict within him, the tension between his duty and his fear. "Relvax," Carathel said softly, stepping closer. "The threads have guided us here for a reason. Trust in their wisdom, as you always have." The tension in the air slowly ebbed. Relvax lowered his staff, his expression unreadable. "If the threads have truly chosen this path, then I will not stand in their way. But know this, the balance is fragile. If you fail, the cost will be unimaginable." The light of the core pulsed brighter, its patterns shifting into a complex dance. Ethan felt a warmth spread through him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. "We won't fail," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. As they left the core chamber, the atmosphere felt lighter, the oppressive weight of the veil replaced by a sense of calm. Ethan glanced at Carathel, who walked beside him, her expression thoughtful. "You knew this would happen, didn't you?" he asked. I knew the threads would lead us here, she said, but their purpose is always a mystery, even to those of us who serve them. Vargas fell into step beside them, his usual sarcasm replaced by a rare moment of sincerity. So, what now? We save the galaxy or something? Ethan chuckled. Something like that. As they emerged from the veil, the twin moons of Cythera bathed the landscape in silvery light. Ethan felt a deep sense of peace, the threads humming softly in his mind. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel lost. He was exactly where he was meant to be.